The calls for Liberal leader Justin Trudeau's resignation are both renewed and growing in his own caucus. More than a dozen MPs have now made the calls publicly, with at least a half dozen coming forward after Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland's resignation yesterday. I'm joined now by three Liberal MPs who were at the caucus meeting last night and who want Justin Trudeau to step down. Alexander Mendez is a Quebec Member of Parliament. Sean Casey is an MP from Prince Edward Island. And Yvonne Baker is an Ontario MP from the Toronto area. It's good to see all three of you. Thank you for being here on what's been a busy week.
Thanks for having us.
Sean Casey, let's start with you. All three of you had said the Prime Minister should step down. All three were at caucus, I believe, last night, where the Prime Minister said he would reflect on what he's heard. We know what you want him to do. What do you think Justin Trudeau is going to do?
I think he's going to stay. Absolutely everything he says, everything he does, the level of energy that he puts into the day-to-day, all points in the same direction. It has consistently. There's been no change. I will say this, he will be staying until he's not. There will not be any signal. Because the moment he signals that he's going, he's done.
Right.
But I don't think he's acting. I think it's real. I think he's staying. I think the way he projects physically, in his words, in his actions, in his energy, it hasn't changed.
You got that at the caucus meeting last night. That was your takeaway from what he said, plus everything else?
I get that every time I see him.
Alexander Mendez, what about you? Do you agree with Sean Casey that the Prime Minister seems intent on staying despite everything?
No, absolutely. I mean, and I agree with Sean that the energy that he displays and that he shows is there, and of someone who intends to stay and intends to finish the job, if you wish. But again, he will stay until he's not staying. So we don't know. We don't know what the future will bring. We don't know what weight he will give the words he heard yesterday. And from the people he heard yesterday. So
Yvonne Baker, do you agree with your colleagues that the Prime Minister, at this point, you believe he is sticking around? He will be your leader until the next election and through it?
I don't know if he's going to stay. It's ultimately his decision, but I wouldn't be here if I was sure he was staying. Because I wouldn't be here if I didn't think it would make a difference. I'm here to repeat the message that I delivered to the Prime Minister in October, along with colleagues and others, that I believe he needs to step down and call a leadership race. When he chose not to do that, colleagues, and I was one of them, called for a secret ballot in caucus to determine whether he should lead us into the next election. He still hasn't responded to that request. And I'm here today because I believe it's really, really important that he does step down. I think it's in the best interest of the country. I think it's in the best interest of the party. And it's frankly what my constituents have been telling me. My constituents have told me, Canadians have told me in large numbers that they want to see change, but they don't want to see Pierre Poilievre become the Prime Minister. And to me, the best way to honor that desire for change is for Justin Trudeau to step down as leader, which gives us a chance, the best chance, to stop Pierre Poilievre.
He said last night, Mr. Baker, that he would reflect on what he heard and factor that into a decision about his future. But he said the same thing when the meeting happened, where the letter and the demands of the letter were presented to him. And within 24 hours, he said, I'm staying. How much time do you, so based on that, how much time do you think he gives this? And how do you think the promise to reflect this time differs from the promise to reflect last time?
It's very difficult to judge because each individual is different. I think, and everybody will interpret the Prime Minister's language and body language differently. I think what I know is that I think the three of us are here, and others believe he must step down because we believe that it's in the best interest of the country, and it's because of what our constituents are telling us. So from my perspective, speaking for myself, I'm going to continue to advocate that he do this. It pains me to do this, but I believe we have to save the party and to protect the country from Pierre Poilievre.
I believe that that's actually something we have to insist on. We're not doing this with any pleasure. We're doing this because it's what our constituents are asking us.
Sure.
And it's not one, two, or three. I've been hearing this since the beginning of the summer.
Well, let's talk about this, if I can, Ms. Mendez, on numbers, because we know there were 24 names on that letter. There was a strong information rumor flow yesterday that more and more names were being added to that list, that it was maybe 30, 40, 50, 60. What is your sense, based on caucus and what you've heard in your conversation you've had, of just how many MPs there are prepared to put their name behind an effort to ask him to step down at this point?
I don't have a number because I haven't done a poll, but I do know that there are more and more colleagues who are talking about this and about the fact that they too are hearing the same request from their constituents. Change the leadership. If you want us to give you another chance, change the leadership. That is ultimately what we're hearing even from Liberals, from our own Liberals.
Sean Casey, what's your sense of how big it is? Because I know you came on this show and said it publicly. You would acknowledge you were one of the people who later signed the letter to ask for the Prime Minister to step down. How big is the movement inside the caucus at this point?
I don't have a sense for how big it is. I can tell you it was bigger yesterday than it was a week before. I can tell you that it's going to get bigger still once the cabinet shuffle is done.
Why do you say that?
The cabinet shuffle has had the effect of taking the 20 or 30 people that think they're in contention and rendering them silent. They haven't been told to stay silent, but anyone who thinks that they're in contention for a cabinet post are not going to be walking up to the mic and say, Mr. Prime Minister, I'm speaking for my constituents, and you must step down. And I think it's much more likely that some of those people feel that way, and they will express their feelings once they're passed over.
Chrystia Freeland had a cabinet post. She had the cabinet post of Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister. And her resignation letter, Mr. Casey, is a pretty stark condemnation of what she calls costly political gimmicks, and Canadians know when we're working for them as opposed to working for ourselves. Confirms a lot of the reporting that was primarily in the Globe and Mail that they were at odds and potentially she was being undermined. How did that affect the dynamic inside your caucus yesterday in terms of the Prime Minister and his, the tenability of his leadership?
Chrystia Freeland is probably one of the most popular cabinet ministers among the caucus. She is one that trusts us. She will say at caucus what she's thinking. She will invite your input. She'll call you out of the blue. That's a rarity. So the way, not just the fact that she left, but the content of the letter, the sharpness of the letter, and the mechanics of her departure. I mean, saying to someone on Friday that you're going to be moved, and then expecting her to deliver a statement that she didn't believe in on Monday, that's rough treatment.
I mean, her target's the Prime Minister there, Mr. Casey, but the collateral damage is the whole Liberal caucus, right? They're kind of caught in this because you can't drop this sort of a letter and not realize the ripple effect it's going to have. I have heard that some MPs are mad about this, the way it was done. Mad at her. Not mad that it happened, but also mad at her for the way she did it. What is your sense of how the caucus feels about this?
I think there's a heck of a lot more empathy and support and love for Chrystia Freeland than there are detractors for the words that she used in her letter.
So, Mr. Baker, we had heard, and it's been reported that Ms. Freeland, who remarkably went to the caucus meeting last night after what happened, received standing ovation, one or multiple, when she got there. Is that in fact the case? And did the Prime Minister get an ovation when he arrived?
So again, it's hard for me to talk about what happens in caucus. That wouldn't be fair to my colleagues, but I would say that Chrystia Freeland was very warmly welcomed. I would say that, and rightly so, because as Sean was just saying, she's very respected. She works well with people. I've known Chrystia for over 10 years now, since before I was in elected office. I sit on the Finance Committee in Parliament, so we work together closely, or we have when she was Minister of Finance. As was alluded to, she works closely with caucus members, she consults with them, she tries to bring that voice to the cabinet table, and I think it's a big loss for our team. I think Chrystia brings tremendous experience and knowledge, but it also, given what we're facing now with Donald Trump and the threat of the 25% tariff on Canadian exports, which poses tremendous risk to our economy and all our quality of life, I think somebody like her, who led us through the negotiations in the prior Trump administration on the renegotiation of NAFTA, would be a tremendous asset to the team, and I think it's a loss to our team.
The Globe and Mail first reported, my colleagues at Radio Canada have confirmed in their reporting that the Prime Minister told her that Mark Carney was going to replace her as the Finance Minister when he moved her. Mark Carney does not appear to be entering the cabinet now. Where do you think this leaves the government in terms of moving forward and the idea of replacing her with an unelected person in that job?
Look, I think there are countless scenarios we could look at. I think the bottom line is that what I'm focused on is representing my constituents from Etobicoke Centre and making sure their voice is heard. And what my constituents are telling me is they want to make sure that they want Justin Trudeau to step down and call a leadership race. They don't want Pierre Poilievre to be Prime Minister. They want another option to vote for who's a Liberal. And I think that's what I'm focused on. The cabinet shuffles will come and go. People will come and go. But at the end of the day, I think what the most important question right now that decides the next election is Justin Trudeau the leader of the Liberal Party or not? Many of my constituents would like him not to be, and that's why I'm here on your show and speaking publicly about this.
No, and look, we'll talk more though. But Ms. Mendes, your thoughts on Chrystia Freeland and the notion that, you know, the person who's been the finance minister for the last 4 years was told she was going to be replaced by someone who is not even elected to the House of Commons.
Well, Chrystia, as my colleague said, she is a very, very good caucus colleague to begin with. And I think that's how she sees her role too. That first and foremost, she is a caucus colleague. She has been very consultative. She's always listening to us, and she explains. She tells us things that, you know, are necessary for us also to then sell whatever we need to sell to constituents. So that has been very helpful. I've always had a lot of admiration for her. I have no idea who the Prime Minister thought would be replacing her. We've heard the rumors like everybody else. We've read the articles. How would that happen? Not sure how would that go down also with Canadians, that a non-elected person would take over the finance portfolio. I can't begin to guess the reasoning of that.
But Ms. Mendes, you've had an evolution in your thinking, right? Because when you first went public your concerns about the Prime Minister's leadership, you said you personally thought Justin Trudeau should stay because he'd done a lot of good things, but your constituents wanted him to go, which a lot of people saw as a parsing. But now you've full-on said he has to go. Was it the Chrystia Freeland news that changed your mind to bring you to this position?
Well, it definitely, yes, took me there. Because my first job is to represent my constituents, obviously, and that's what I was doing in September because that's what I had heard throughout the summer. While I was not convinced that we should change leaders, I had to voice what my constituents had told me. But right now, and I really was very affected by the way the Minister of Finance was treated, so yes, that pushed me there.
So Sean Casey, for argument's sake, you're correct, and Justin Trudeau decides he's not going to leave because that's the impression he's been sending. I know when we first spoke about this, you said you intended to run again if you would sign your nomination papers. I don't know if you've been told differently. But what do you do now after this? Because the Freeland move seems to really change the narrative on this, change the public impression of this, and certainly, because this is not an anonymous letter, this is the Deputy Prime Minister going out the door with a bang. What do you do if his reflection leads that he's still the right person to lead you?
So first of all, I'm pleased to tell you that my application for candidacy has been accepted. And my picture is now up on the website of acclaimed Liberal candidates.
So no punishment, no punishment for what you said. That's an interesting thing to hear. Okay.
Yeah. And I fully intend to run again. I will be running again. This is a fight worth fighting. The Liberal caucus is united in the fact that they don't want Pierre Poilievre to be the Prime Minister, that would be disastrous for Canada. Where we differ is what's the best way to get there. The three of us here at the table feel that the best way to get there is for the Prime Minister to move along. I'm running again. I'm running to keep Pierre Poilievre away from the Charlottetown seat, and I'm going to do everything I can to do that. And it's a fight worth fighting, and that hasn't changed. If the Prime Minister decides he's staying, that's his decision to make. As I say, he's got the right to be wrong, and it will be shoulder to the wheel and focus on the things I can control.
So how do things get better then from here? Help me understand that, because you've seen the fundraising gaps, you've seen the polling gaps. I mean, you're all acutely aware of the reality of it. If Justin Trudeau stays, how can he turn things around at this point to even raise the floor?
The immediate thing that could happen, and maybe it's a Hail Mary, but a clear win on the tariff negotiations.
Yeah, exactly.
That could be a game changer.
That's tough, though, counting on Donald Trump to turn things around, right?
But that's where we are.
Yvonne Baker, your thoughts. I mean, how do things get better from here should the Prime Minister decide to stay, knowing where public opinion is and knowing where some caucus opinion is and what the political headwinds are?
Well, look, I mean, I think from my point of view, I'm not going to hypothesize as to what I'm going to do in terms of my candidacy. I'm going to wait to see what's decided. But currently I'm running, I'm nominated, but as far as where we go from here, we'll have to see. As far as how we do our best in the next election, I think we got to keep delivering for Canadians. I think we got to make sure that we're successful in negotiating this threat of tariffs. That's priority one as far as I'm concerned, and because that affects the quality of life of Canadians very, very profoundly. But I think we got to continue working on building housing, continue working on those affordability measures, implementing dental care, which has made such a difference in not only the cost of living for folks, who've saved a lot of money, but the quality of health care that they're getting, the investments we made in health care. These are the sorts of things that I think we need to continue doing to deliver for people and to show that we're delivering for people. I think we have delivered for people in so many ways on those issues: housing, affordability, health care, et cetera. But at the same time, I think that Canadians, as much as that's happened, as much as we have a record we can be proud of in that regard, I think Canadians do want to see a change, and that's why I'm here today.
I just want to quickly make sure I'm not misunderstanding you. When you said you're currently nominated, you plan to run, but we'll see. Does that mean you might reconsider being a Liberal candidate in the next election if there isn't a leadership change? Is that what I take from those comments?
I'm not going to make it contingent on anything in particular. I'm just saying currently I'm running, but I'm not going to speculate as to what I will do in the months to come.
Okay. Ms. Mendez, same question to you in terms of how do things get better from here? Because if you are also correct that the Prime Minister is staying, despite your strongly held opinion he should leave, how do you turn things around with the Canadian public?
Definitely the tariffs. That clearly would be a game changer in many ways. But also, yes, the implementation of many policies that right now are stuck in Parliament. And I'm taking here my role as chair occupant and seeing how dysfunctional Parliament is.
Right, you're part of the Speaker's team in terms of managing work through
exactly,
Parliament.
and seeing how very little we've been able to do in Parliament these past 3 months. How are we going to change that coming back in January? Because if we want to actually implement things and continue implementing things for Canadians, we will need Parliament to move past these privilege issues. And so that would perhaps help. But I really hope that at least the tariffs, we get it done, because that is the biggest threat right now to Canadians' quality of life.
Okay. I'm out of time. I have one last quick question, Mr. Case. I hope you can help me with this. Did the Prime Minister give you a sense of when he would give an answer? Are we looking at a January timeline, first week of January, January 6th, after people come back? Do you know when you in the country, because we haven't heard anything from the Prime Minister really since this started. Do you know when you're going to get an answer on his reflection?
No idea.
No idea. Okay.
No idea, no indication.
Okay, all right, so you're as in the dark as we are. Okay, well, we're all waiting, but thank you for being here and speaking with me, Alexander Mendez, Yvonne Baker, and Sean Casey. A Prime Minister at odds with his former Finance Minister who might just have leadership ambitions. It's not a new story for the Liberals, because you might remember the frenzy in caucus after former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien announced then Finance Minister Paul Martin's abrupt departure from Cabinet in June of 2002.
We discussed the situation. This has nothing to do with the situation in the Department of Finance and the economic policies of the government. There were other problems that existed that was making it difficult for him and difficult for me. And we mutually agreed that he was to leave.
Let me just say that I've obviously going to have to reflect on my options.
There were differing accounts of what really happened leading up to Martin's exit, as Martin was Chrétien's greatest rival for the Liberal leadership and would succeed him, which led to questions about whether the finance minister chose to leave his post or if he was pushed out by Chrétien. I'm joined now by Eddie Goldenberg, who was there through all of that. He served as former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien's chief of staff when all of this went down. Eddie Goldenberg, it's good to see you.
Nice to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
A little bit of deja vu these last 24 hours.
Well,
what do you make of what
not,
we've been seeing here?
Well, I'm not sure, but I think the week after next is 2025, and I'd rather talk about 2025 than what happened or didn't happen in 2002 or 2003.
No, I'm not here to litigate history, but just sort of to remind the audience of those things that happened and the parallels with today.
Well, I don't think there are any parallels with today, because there were no differences over policy between Mr. Martin and Mr. Chrétien.
Right.
And clearly there's a big difference in policy between Mrs. Freeland and the Prime Minister today. So,
but you know well the challenges of losing a finance minister and losing them sort of unexpected circumstances, and this is what has happened with Chrystia Freeland, resigning on the day of the fall economic statement of all days. What were you thinking as you watched this all unfold yesterday?
Well, it's an incredible crisis for the government, for sure. I've never seen anything like this before. Having said that, David, you know, the Chinese character for crisis is the same character for opportunity. And I actually think that there's an opportunity for the Liberal government today if it's prepared to seize it.
Well, there's definitely a crisis. So walk us through the opportunity.
I'll tell you the opportunity. And I think there are three things that are essential. First of all, the Prime Minister has to announce his resignation. He can't fool around anymore. Canadians don't want someone who's been there more than 10 years. Rightly or wrongly. The only leaders who last more than 10 years basically are Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. So he's got to announce his resignation. I think he has to announce it fast. I would think that the best timing for him would be this week. Second, we're in a difficult situation. We're not in a normal situation. The Liberal Party executive has to understand that we are not in a normal situation. Normally, a Prime Minister would announce a retirement, there'd be a convention 3 or 4 months later, and the retirement would take effect at that time.
Right.
We can't afford that today. We can't afford it because of the precariousness of the government situation in the House of Commons, and because Donald Trump's administration takes office a month and 3 days from now.
Right.
What I think the party executive can do is it can decide that the cabinet and the caucus should choose who the next Prime Minister will be, just like they do in Australia, they do it in Great Britain, and announce that there will be a leadership convention after the next election. If the new Prime Minister wins the next election, it'll be a very easy convention. If he doesn't or she doesn't,
Right.
There'll be a real race. So there are two things. Third, the caucus and the cabinet have an enormous responsibility today. This is not, as I said, this is not normal times. Cabinet have to find a potential prime minister who could win the respect and the confidence of the people of Canada. I'd say, David, in normal times, they could look today, probably Dominic LeBlanc. He's a very good minister. He's got great political judgment. He's got the respect of caucus. They could look at François-Philippe Champagne. He's been a very good minister of industry. He's charming, he's knowledgeable, and he also could be a good Prime Minister. But these aren't normal times.
Right.
Because
in normal times, the Liberal Party constitution would say you need like 27 days to build a committee and then 90 days to have candidates.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so you're into June, right?
Yeah,
May.
yeah. But I'm saying these aren't normal times. Who's the British Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan, who said a week is a long time in politics? I think what the cabinet and the caucus have to do is they have to do something out of the ordinary. They have to look at something unexpected, not ordinary. They've got to look at how Chrystia Freeland, it's my view, has been, looked at over the past couple of days. I think they have to look at the way the people have decided that she has declared her independence from the Prime Minister. She's not Justin Trudeau 2.0. Donald Trump attacked her last night.
Yeah.
The way he attacked her is exactly why Canadians would want to have somebody like that as Prime Minister. Trump is a bully, and he knows that she would push back. He'd rather have somebody who won't push back. Canadians want somebody who would push back. The premiers yesterday was very interesting, the way they praised her as the person who could really, they were sorry to lose her because she could, be Captain Canada. We need a Captain Canada. We need the premiers, but we need somebody from the federal government. So, I say, look at her, ask yourself, if Trump doesn't like her, the other leader who doesn't like her is Vladimir Putin.
Right.
And in an election campaign, if the issue is who can best stand up to and confront Donald Trump, Chrystia Freeland or Pierre Poilievre, I think she would do very well.
So judge people by the quality of their enemies rather than by the quality of their friends in this case. But for any of this to happen, Mr. Goldenberg, the Prime Minister has to do step one, which is step down.
Yeah.
It's very unclear to me at this point if that is where he is headed. Like, I am not in those meetings, obviously, but, every sense people who have been in the meetings with him have is that right now there's a very real probability that he sticks around here.
I would have said, I'm not in the meetings either.
Yeah.
Okay? So we're speculating. A week ago, I would have said there's a good chance he wants to stay. I think there's a qualitative difference what happened yesterday. We're not in any way near where we were a week ago. And you see where the caucus, from reports, I'm not at caucus and I don't know I was out for too long to know a lot of members of the caucus, but you see reports that the caucus basically wants him out.
There's a large number for sure, right?
You know,
Whether it's half the caucus, we don't know, but it's large.
And he has to make that decision, but, you know, once you make the decision, you announce it, and I think he's got to do it fast. I think he should give the caucus, the cabinet, till the first Monday in January to choose a new leader. The new prime minister should come into office on January 6th, would have time to adjust policies, time to become better known to Canadians. It'd be several weeks before Trump is inaugurated. It's before January 27th and the House comes back, but the Prime Minister, if he's announcing his resignation, is most likely to announce a prorogation of Parliament.
Quite possibly.
Until, the end of March.
Until there's a leadership of some sort. So help me, just want to make sure I understand what you're proposing. He steps down now, is your proposal.
Yeah.
And the executive of the Liberal Party sort of sets aside the normal leadership rules and gives permission to the caucus to have a secret ballot or a show of hands vote to pick someone from amongst their members to be the leader and just go from there.
That's
essentially.
Right. That's right. And
do you think that's enough to win back Canadian support, given where everything is?
I don't think it would be easy, but I think if it's a person who captures the imagination of Canadians, somebody who would be not only a peer, somebody who is competent and who will stand up to Donald Trump, will speak for Canadians, put that against the Conservative leader who, what do we get from him? We get anger and angrier. And what we get from him in domestic affairs are basically we get slogans. Some of them are catchy, some of them are less catchy, but there's been no substance from him. I think, in the United States, I was talking to a former American ambassador to Canada today. He was a Democrat. He said to me, he said, Kamala Harris came close to winning, and she probably would have won if she had been able to differentiate herself from President Biden. And he said, looking at this from the distance of where he is in Detroit, he said yesterday, Chrystia Freeland distanced herself from Justin Trudeau. So you could get change with the same party. So is it possible? I think yes, it's possible. I think the Liberals have to must see it as an opportunity. I hope the caucus and the cabinet would have the courage to grasp that opportunity. And then, there are a lot of Canadians who are prepared to vote for Poilievre. I have friends that way who say, we don't want Trudeau. But we don't really like Poilievre, but we don't want Trudeau. Well, when they don't have Trudeau to kick around anymore, and the choice is between somebody, between Poilievre, who has no policies, and somebody who is known to be competent, somebody who has decided that she is who has declared her independence, I think that the next election could be very close.
But do you think it should be Chrystia Freeland? Because the criticism of Chrystia Freeland inside caucus is very loyal, very hardworking, very smart, very capable, but maybe lacks
so far so good.
but maybe lacks the political and communication skills necessary to win an election. Whereas Dominic LeBlanc is seen as someone who has those in some abundance, which is why he's always called in to fix problems in the cabinet. Right?
I would say that there's no question that he has those skills. That he has those skills. In normal circumstances, I think those skills would be very important for him.
Right.
David, we're not in normal circumstances. And if you take somebody who has been attacked by Donald Trump because she is too strongly Canadian, I think people want that. And, she has enormous economic credentials. She's been shackled a bit. And, it's normal. The Prime Minister will shackle a bit, and the Minister of Finance. That's gone now. And she's came out yesterday as a centrist. She came out yesterday as believing that you can't redistribute income that you don't have.
Right.
That you have to grow the pie first. So, would it be a slam dunk in the next election? No. Would she have a better chance than anybody else? My view is yes. And you know something, if you'd asked me that a week ago, I would have said, I might have said no.
Right.
But, this week is far different than last week.
Okay, yesterday was not the day we expected with the fall economic statement. We thought Sean Fraser's departure was going to be the big news, and it still is important news. I have one last question for you because we're almost out of time. More and more Liberals I speak with look at this next election, whatever happens with the leadership, it's not about winning. It's about coming second. Because the numbers out there right now would put them at third, maybe fourth in the seat count behind a Bloc Québécois opposition. I mean, in terms of setting the goal for what is to come in the vote in the next year, do you think it needs to be realistically about raising the floor enough that you don't drop past official opposition status if you can't win the
I
thing?
got to tell you, I have never believed in running for number two.
I hear you.
I believe in running for number one. And, you know, if you don't get number one, then you'll get number two. But do it. You know, I think the party has an opportunity if they have the courage to do the right thing. They may very well end up with number one, because I don't think a lot of people would really like to have Poilievre as number one. So we'll see.
Eddie Goldenberg, former Chief of Staff to former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, I want to thank you for your time. We appreciate you being here today, sir.
Thank you very much, David.
The Liberal caucus is united in the fact that they don't want Pierre Poilievre to be the Prime Minister, that would be disastrous for Canada. Where we differ is what's the best way to get there. The three of us here at the table feel that the best way to get there is for the Prime Minister to move along.
It's really, really important that he does step down. I think it's in the best interest of the country. I think it's in the best interest of the party. And it's frankly what my constituents have been telling me.
Change the leadership. If you want us to give you another chance, change the leadership. That is ultimately what we're hearing even from Liberals, from our own Liberals.
But Trudeau still has some Liberals in his corner.
Confidence in the Prime Minister? Yes, I do.
All of us should be loyal to the Prime Minister because he has done exactly what he laid out that he would do on behalf of Canadians over the last 9 years. So.
And do you still have confidence in the Prime Minister yourself?
I do, absolutely.
He's stewarded us through that those many years, and I believe that he will lead us to the next election.
I have confidence in the Prime Minister.
Why?
He's a strong leader. He's focused on delivering for Canadians.
Chad Collins is the Liberal MP for Hamilton East Stony Creek, and he joins me now. Chad Collins, welcome to the show. It's good to see you, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, David.
You're one of the MPs who has called for the Prime Minister to step down. Does that mean you don't have confidence in him, or you just think he can't win the next election?
That's a great question. I would say that, listening to the last comments of from my colleagues that talked about what the Prime Minister has done for this country, there's no denying it. I think history is going to be very kind to the Prime Minister in terms of what he's done on several files, right? In terms of the social supports that have been put in place during his tenure, climate change, reconciliation, I mean, the list goes on. All of those files are important, and I think the Prime Minister's done great work. But one thing I am aware of are the comments that my other colleagues made, and that is that people have tuned him out. And I feel like going into the next election that I have one or both hands behind my back in terms of trying to prevent a Pierre Poilievre government from coming to power. And I'm very afraid of what his Make Canada Great Again agenda entails in terms of it'll mean cuts to social program, right? I mean, you've heard on your program several times before in terms of his bumper sticker solution of fix the budget, and fix the budget will mean probably the demise of the dental program. It'll mean the elimination of the Canada Disability Benefit. I can go on with those programs, right? The whole nonsense of defund the CBC, all that stuff comes to fruition. And I think my constituents, by and large, worry about that. And so I think that if we're going into the next election, we need to ensure that we have someone that's leading the party that has the best ability and best chance of defeating and competing with.
So who is that?
I don't think
who is that?
That's an open question, and that's not for me to decide. That'll be for Liberal supporters to determine in a leadership process, as has happened in the past historically. But I would say that the Prime Minister has lost the confidence and support of Canadians from coast to coast to coast. And that's a problem. And that's been the case for well over a year now. And I would say, David, that many members of our caucus have tried to work this out behind closed doors, right? It's not an open secret that there have been many people questioning his leadership for well over a year now. As soon as interest rates went up, and as soon as people were asking for different changes depending on the file, and those changes didn't come, and we didn't receive answers, quite frankly, then we start to see those the question of leadership then spill into the public realm.
Right.
And I think that's where we're at today, and
Yeah.
and that's culminated with Chrystia's departure in the last 48 hours. And I think concerning to a lot of members of caucus is that we seem to be rudderless right now. There are decisions that are being made without any consultation with caucus members, without consultation with cabinet. I think Chrystia was quite clear in terms of the disagreements that she had with the Prime Minister on the $250 rebate. I can't believe that passed through any type of process internally, whether it's in the Prime Minister's office or otherwise. I can't believe that we would present an affordability package that didn't include seniors and people with disabilities.
Okay.
So all that said,
Right.
there's a lot of chaos, I think, that's happening, not just in the Prime Minister's office, but in caucus in general. And I think it shows a lack of leadership at this point.
Well, rudderless and chaos, I mean, those are strong criticisms of the government of which you are a part. And I know you've revealed yourself as one of the 24 MPs who signed the letter and presented the demand to resign to the Prime Minister at several caucus meetings ago. He said at that time he'd reflect on what he heard and give a decision, and he came back with a rejection in under 24 hours. Seems like he's taken a bit more time this time. Sean Casey doesn't think he's going to leave. Alexander Mendez, who was on the show earlier, doesn't think he's going to leave. Yvonne Baker doesn't know what Justin Trudeau is going to do, and that could affect what he ultimately does. What do you think the Prime Minister is going to do?
Well, only the Prime Minister knows the answer to that question. I don't have a crystal ball.
What impression did he give you after caucus last night? Because he seemed determined to stay on, is the impression some people have given me of what they heard from him last night.
Well, without breaching confidence, my question to the Prime Minister in the summer at Ontario caucus was, people have tuned you out. Can you tell us what the path forward is in terms of you trying to reconnect with Canadians? What plan do you have without sharing, details and the blueprints? But tell us you have a plan that shows caucus that you are willing and able to engage with Canadians and try to move the needle on the polling numbers. And I think, if I look at this past attempt with the rebate and the gimmick that I think Chrystia rightfully characterized it as, I think it was a poor attempt at re-engaging with Canadians and trying to earn their support. We can't buy their support. And I oftentimes feel like in the last couple of months, I'm left, like all other caucus members, about reading these things in the media, and there's no consultation. And I'll be quite frank, I sometimes feel like we're Stepford MPs and we're just, we're political missionaries that are out there trying to sell a plan that we haven't been a part of creating. And that's a problem. And so I respect the fact that the buck stops with us as elected representatives. And I respect the fact that the Prime Minister, everything flows through him, and the decisions are his, and we're supposed to certainly be a part of that process, but we haven't been. And I have a problem with that. And so, and that's why I felt in October that I should put my name on that list, and tried again over the last couple of months to encourage my colleagues to think about a leadership change and what that might mean for the government and for Canadians and for our chances in terms of the next election. And unfortunately, we were unsuccessful over a period of months. And Chrystia's situation, I think, has certainly changed things.
So on the letter effort, I've reported and said on the show, it was Sophie Chattel, the MP for Pontiac, who was collecting the signatures and was the keeper of the document that has a list of all of the names on it, sort of binding everyone to the effort. I was told yesterday that this was being resurrected a little bit, and you're trying to add more names to this effort and to grow it from there. We know there were 24 who signed it the first time. What is your sense of the level of MPs willing to put their name behind an effort to ask the Prime Minister to leave as of today?
I would put that number at double, if not triple. And Mr. Singh agrees with us now. And so I think that's an important factor to keep in mind in terms of where we're going through the next couple of months and into the spring.
So 60, 70 Liberal MPs, you think it's that high? I mean, the caucus is what, 153? You subtract the cabinet, that's like 36 names. You get down to around 120. You think more than half of the backbench wants the Prime Minister to go?
I think if there was a secret ballot tomorrow, David, and I know that's something that we've pushed for as a group, I think those numbers are quite high, including a number of people who are in cabinet. I mean, Wayne's Wayne Long, my colleague and friend, has been on a couple of times, and he talks about people in the lobby giving the wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and that happens quite regularly, and that's happening with cabinet ministers as well. And so I think there's fear of what happens if they publicly come out, and I think Chrystia's situation is an opportunity for those people to give sober second thought to what their public statements are and what level of support that they continue to provide to the Prime Minister. And we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks.
Well, Chad Collins, we're just out of time, but I just have to ask you, what do you do if after the holidays, after the Prime Minister has reflected, he gives you the same answer he gave you after the last period of reflection, that he is staying and thinks he's the best person to lead the party in the next election? What do you do?
Well, everyone has life decisions to make for 2025. And I think what you'll see if he decides to stay, David, you'll see a lot of very talented, very smart, intelligent people decide that they don't want to run in 2025. And I think that will definitely ensure that Mr. Poilievre becomes Prime Minister, and the Make Canada Great Again agenda is underway probably for the next 4 years.
Liberal MP for Hamilton East, Stoney Creek, Chad Collins, thank you for your time today, sir. We appreciate you being available.
Thanks, David. Merry Christmas.